Okay, good morning. Okay, is it the pizza or is it the box? As you probably know, I am in favor of the idea that it's the pizza. I got online the other day and checked with Pizza Hut. One slice of their plain cheese pizza can have anywhere from 270 to 340 calories. And who eats just one slice? And who doesn't put other things on it, a little pepperoni, some anchovies, sometimes extra cheese, sometimes veggies, a lot of different things. But what's been happening over the past few decades, as you've heard, is especially since the 80s, and these are data from the US Bureau of the Census, looking at on the top overweight, then the great increase in obesity since that period. Also, there's been an increase in extremely obese people. And when we're talking about this, we're talking about obesity as defined by body mass index, or BMI. And this is, in metric terms, kilograms of body weight per meter squared in height. So it's an index that is useful for populations, which is what these data are from. And it's not so useful, you may have read in some places, well, you know, Shaquille O'Neal, when he was at his playing weight, he had a BMI of 40 or something like that, because he was very muscular. Well, it's not to be used on extreme athletes. It's not to be used on individuals at all, really. It's really a population type of measure. And as such, it's a good indication of what's been happening in our population. So this has affected everyone. At the top, you can see the overweight changes in men and women, and the obesity in women and men has increased, while the overweight sectors have stayed pretty constant or even dropped a bit, possibly because some of the overweight people moved into the obese category. And then again, the extreme obesity has continued to go up. And here we're talking class, you might also hear about class 1, 2, and 3 obesity. Class 3 obesity would be someone whose BMI is 40 and up. So a normal BMI, or one that we try and encourage people to adhere to, is somewhere between 18 and say 22. You're considered overweight if your BMI is between say 25 and 30, and obese, class 1 obesity would be a BMI of 30 and up. So what causes obesity? Obviously, I think there are two main characteristics. One is eating more and moving less, but there are mediators. One of them is metabolism. Most of us know people who can eat whatever they want and still stay thin, and other people who seem to be on constant diets who can't seem to lose that last 5 pounds. And the efficiency with which we process food differs from person to person, and some of that is due to genetics. We do know from studies on twins, identical and monozygotic and dizygotic twins, and from adoption studies, that genetics does have an important role to play. Exactly why and how, we're not sure, but in adoption studies, for example, it's been determined that the BMI, or the body mass of individuals, is more like that of the biological family than it is of the adoptive family. So although environment does have a role to play, so does genetics. And of course, with the environment, we're talking activity and energy intake being prime movers. Now, what's been happening in this country, and in fact all over the world, both in developed and in developing countries, is that the amount of food, the average daily intake in calories, has gone up, say from 1971 with the first NHANES study to NHANES in 1999 to 2000. And there are later data, but this is just giving you an indication that men started around 2450 calories a day, and now they're up to 2618, which is not a huge amount of increase, but over a long period of time, it will have an effect. Women are up even more like 20% as opposed to 1 or 2% for men. And again, we have to recognize that these data on food intake are all going to be self-reported. Even with careful interviews, there can still be some bias in what people think they should be eating or how much they should be eating and what they therefore report. And then here are some recent data that was just in the CDC's MMWR that this is sort of minimal levels of activity, percent of US adults who report walking for leisure or transportation, even just walking the dog. In 2005, that was 57% for women, 54% for men. 2015, it went up, which is good news. 65% for women, 63% for men. And that's good news, as I said, except that still leaves somewhere between 35 and 40% of us who don't even do that. So inactivity is a big problem for many people, and we're not even talking about people who go to the gym regularly or not. Now, you will hear some, I'm sure, very cogent scientific information from Dr. Saif about different chemicals, but this is data that one of my colleagues, Dr. Josh Bloom at ACSH came up with. And by that I don't mean he made it up. He actually did the calculations. But looking at the difference between the estrogen binding affinity of a couple of different chemicals. First of all, estradiol, which is the major estrogen in humans, the most active. BPA, which has been one of the bugbears, is that a word? Yeah, bugbears. Recently with some of what we call the fear mongers in our society. That has a over 12,000% lower affinity for an estrogen receptor than does estradiol. Now, genistein, which is an isoflavone that's in soy, and everybody knows how healthy soy is supposed to be for you, that also has a very low estrogen binding affinity, estrogen receptor binding affinity, but it is still much greater than that of BPA. But what are we afraid of? BPA. So I would leave you with the idea that yes, obesity is a significant problem in our society. There are a lot of health consequences from it, but the most likely reasons for it are the pizza and what's in the pizza, the calories, and the lack of activity that we have come to see as one of the hallmarks of our modern society. Thank you.
All right, it's the box. And I'd like to convince you that it's the box. But first, let me just back up and give you a little bit more in terms of numbers with respect to obesity. These are mainly from two articles, one in Lancet that came out late last year, and one that's in Press. It's a really good article and very extensive in the New England Journal, and it's online. The body mass index for men and women in 75 was 21.7. It's gone now to 2014. And percent underweight men and women has also gone down. So we can see there's a big increase in body weight. And if you subtract from that the number of people that get insufficient calories, it's even bigger than those numbers. The problem with being overweight is the associated health effects, and they include cardiovascular disease, stroke, multiple cancers, diabetes, low back pain, kidney disease, almost anything you can think of obesity is a risk factor, and it's a very serious risk factor for almost all diseases. Now, what I want to do in this sort of brief part of the debate is to look at obesity in terms of where we are and compare it to another developed country. And you hopefully can guess why I chose Italy. Number one, we always like to think that we're number one, and we are number one usually. We were number one in obesity in '75, and we've improved to number two. So we are number two. In severe obesity, we've maintained our leading status in the world in men. In women, number two and number one consistently from 1975 to 2014. But what about the Italians? They're a developed country, and you'll see my insignias. There's the Leaning Tower of Pisa, not pizza. That represents Italy. Bad. Sorry. Obesity in men they were number 6. Now they're number 9. Severe obesity, they were number 9. Now they're number 12. So they're actually getting thinner and healthier in Italy compared to us. And it's the same status with Italian women. Okay. What's the reason for this? I don't know. Are there any Italians here? Probably not. Okay. It's a very slender looking Italian in the back. But TV watching and exercise, they watch a lot of TV. So do we. They don't exercise that much. They're mainly drinking wine and sitting around in restaurants, and so do we. We don't exercise that much. Mediterranean diet could contribute to the reason why they're number 10 or number 11 in the world and we're number 1 or number 2 in obesity. Other factors, pizza. Could it be pizza? That's what the debate's about. Well, they eat a lot of pizza, and so do we. So if it's not pizza, could it be the box? There's pizza there. You can see cheese, pepperoni, and beef, finest ingredients. It's like a Papa John's advertisement. And here we have the pizza containers. Now, it really isn't pizza or the pizza box. It's pizza or the pizza containers. And they include boxes, plastic wraps, all sorts of things that you can find in the frozen food section of the grocery store. So there's a lot of associations or a lot of problems, not problems, but a lot of facts that we should know about those boxes. And so here we have the situation, the pizza paradox. Italians, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, thin, like the Italian gentleman. And here we have us Americans, I guess symbolized by Chris Christie at the beach last week. He loves his pizza. So we have this paradox. Both groups eat a lot of pizza, but one is exposed to the pizza box chemicals. And here's the whole thing. If you're in Italy, and luckily only one person here can speak to this. If you're in Italy, you don't get a pizza box. You go up to a little stand, and you get Italian-style pizza on a bleached, dioxin-free napkin. Americans, we eat it from all these containers. We get it from the grocery store. And what happens with that is that leaching in from the box or the container to the pizza and eventually into your gut are all these compounds. And they include not only bisphenol A, but phthalates, phenolics, not organohalogens, they're already in you from other sources, but all these endocrine disrupting compounds leach in from the boxes. And so these are some of the structures of these compounds. And what we're able to do, particularly with all the epidemiology studies that have been carried out, is to look at levels of these in humans and their association with various diseases. Now, I'm not saying proof they cause it, I'm saying that there's an association. And here's what a number of expert panels have stated in some of these articles. We found a positive association between BMI and waist circumference among all males for most phthalate metabolites. So there was an association in that study. The people that had the higher level of phthalates were fatter, more obese. The authors summarized compelling evidence that supports the hypothesis, the harmful effects of environmental contaminants on obesity. And thirdly, there is strong mechanistic, experimental, animal, and epidemiological evidence for endocrine disruption, namely obesity and diabetes. Let me just give you two quick results. This is a urinary phthalate metabolite measurement in correlation with obesity, not diabetes. These are phthalates, and you can measure phthalates or their half esters. They're associated, in this particular study, the higher phthalate levels were associated with higher body mass index and a higher waist circumference. And so these are published data, and I think they're from N. Haynes individuals where urine was collected and various measurements were taken. And finally, the association of urinary metabolites with metabolic syndrome, which is a combination of waist circumference, triglycerides, HDL, blood pressure, and blood glucose. And what you can see that men over 50 have an increased level in the various quartiles that are being measured of the phthalate metabolites, and women with another phthalate metabolite. So it's quite clear from these studies and many other that in human populations, these phthalates, which leach from the pizza boxes and the pizza containers, the higher level you have, the more you're associated with a higher body mass index or obesity. So let me just conclude. Pizza is a high-calorie, delicious food. It just tastes so good. Consumed equally by Italians and Americans. Boxes and containers extensively used by U.S. consumers contribute to increased exposure to endocrine-disrupting compounds like phthalates, bisphenol A, etc. These EDCs, or endocrine-disrupting compounds, in combination, not alone, but in combination with other factors, is a major contributor to enhancement of obesity in U.S. residents. It's the box.
I would like to point out, first of all, that epidemiological associations are very easy to make, that this kind of study is useful for hypothesis generating, but it cannot be taken as causal by any stretch of the imagination. For example, if people eat more pizza, if people are eating more, if, as I said, people are eating more food, and that's one of the main reasons why they are becoming fatter, then you would expect more exposure to these supposedly endocrine disrupting chemicals, and that's really why you might be seeing those levels go up. And there are a lot of endocrine disruptions that go on simply due to obesity. Things like insulin resistance, for example, goes up because of obesity, not because of any kind of chemical interference from your pizza box or container. As far as the urinary samples go, these are usually spot checks, and much of these urinary metabolites come right through without really staying in the system long enough to do any real damage. And as I said before, the affinity, for example, for the estrogen receptor is so much lower that it's hard to believe that in a system in which you have estradiol present, that these could have any effect on the estrogen receptors whatsoever. So I can't say that I'm convinced that it's the box. I still think it's the pizza. Thank you.
I'll just make a few points. You showed in some of your, in one of your slides, or a couple of your slides, that there was an increase in body mass index, an increase basically in obesity in our populations. And I would point out that that does not correlate, I think, with the increased pizza consumption. Because we've been eating a lot of pizza for a long time, and I'm not sure that it's going up. We have more pizza companies, but I'm not sure we're eating more pizza, so it doesn't correlate. I'm not saying it's an inverse correlation, but it doesn't correlate. I think your estrogen binding data really, we don't know exactly how endocrine disruptors work. The estrogen receptor could be involved. There may be many other things involved. And I think what you're doing is comparing a binding assay, but that doesn't necessarily translate to a tissue-specific potency. Moreover, we're not dealing with one compound, we're dealing with a whole host of compounds in combination with what we have in the diet. Those are minor points. Here's the point that really I want you to pay attention to. I just got an email from Chris Christie. He just wrote me, and he wanted to make two important points. Number one, President Obama is not a Muslim. He's a Sikh. And number two, he agrees with me. It's the box, not the pizza. Thank you.
Yes, we have time now for a few questions.
I'm a pharmacologist, so your data, you had no error bars. But you had a slide that showed the main difference was a Mediterranean diet. So it might not be the pizza, but it's probably the diet, which would argue against the box.
Yeah, a lot's made of this Mediterranean diet. I don't think that much of it. It's a lot greasy and a lot of olive oil and stuff like that. It's the box.
Hi, I'm Emma Hansen from the state of Vermont. That was thoroughly entertaining, and the scientific explanation for the box was not at all what I was expecting. And I'm kind of surprised that you didn't take advantage of the marketing angle from the box and what is on it and the advertising therein, and reflective of marketing and culture, and it's linked to obesity.
I can quit here. Why you were thinking you didn't use the marketing angle with all the advertisements on the box, and that could be a reason.
Yeah.
There you go. You say that, yeah.
Oh, well, I think the marketing certainly has something to do with it. I think other things that go beyond the box, our culture has changed. If you go back and look at the size, for example, of dishes and glasses in the early 80s, and you compare them to what's available and what's used now, it used to be that 5 ounces of wine filled up a wine glass, and now it's like this much of the bottom. So we've become conditioned to bigger portion sizes, and that's something that I didn't mention or show the data to, but that has certainly gone up as well. And then the marketing, of course, is a big factor, although I think marketers would say, well, we're just trying to give people choices, but when you have a constant refrain of, this is cheaper, get 2 for the price of 1, well, if you get 2 for the price of 1, you eat 2 instead of 1. So, that certainly will contribute to what's going on, and especially I think when you're marketing to children on children's TV and in the cartoon shows, they're not marketing carrots, whether they're straight carrots or lumpy carrots. They're marketing things that are usually high calorie and maybe not quite so good for you. So certainly marketing has a role to play.
I'm sorry, we're cutting into everyone's breaks, and so no more time for questions, unfortunately. I'm sorry, they'll be around afterwards, but we want to get this vote in and then give you some time to grab some more coffee before the next session.